for us to say, oh sorry, and we've hurt one of our own people like that because of the passion and the anger of somebody who sees it, thinks, oh, well, let's blow the bridge up and that'll sort it out, without realising that somebody's kids were playing underneath it when they did it. I think that's something that we've got to be very careful of, because we've seen too much history and proof of that type of action. But at this point in time, the action at the moment that stopped them from Dannyburg was simple. Everybody's just said no. And then they thought, well, we'll let them cool their heels down and we'll come back up here. Then the owners on Waitangi, half said yes and the other half went, ooh, we don't know. But because they're in a hurry, and then the cost of building the road up to the well site, and the time they had, and because of winter and everything else, they couldn't achieve their goal, so that's why they've shifted over to the secondary place to do it. And so, you know, that's what I say, it depends on how you want to deal with it. If you're really against it, then it needs to be thought through.
I think the problem, the thing we have here, we're lucky because we're one of the last places on earth that's getting this, although I'm sure there'll be islands in like the Pacific, I don't know, there'll be all sorts of strange places in the world getting this as it runs out. The problem is, best practice in all these other countries, especially America, Australia, has not proven to be safe. And so are we going to let this start this year here, when the rest of the world can't prove it's safe? That is a big problem for us. Yeah. That's why we really want to slow the process down. The oil's not going anywhere. Gas, if they want gas, it's not going anywhere. And make sure, as Drew said, keep it off the best parts of New Zealand, you know. Keep it away from our communities. And when you know you're doing it properly, go to these places, you know, not here please, do it where it's safe. Or if something does go wrong, the small chance, because nothing's perfect, something goes wrong, do it where we're not, you know.
We're also really careful, just taking up that point you're making there at Salem. We're always careful to say we are not blockading the landowner, we're blockading the company. And we've gone to a lot of trouble to talk to the landowners involved and make that point to them. We are not, you know, we are not picking on you, we're not scapegoating you. We're just simply putting this blockade out because we don't in our community. And look, you know, it's worked every time so far. There's been no really bad blood as a result of it.
And I think the other thing is for us to be mindful of it. It's not coal it's not the coal seam that we're looking at. They're looking at the shale seam, which is 2,000 metres below us, or feet below us.
It's the same thing.
That's where they're going at this point in time, and what they're trying. You know, that's why they're having the test well. You see, one of the things is, just so everybody knows, that there's been comments about Ngāti Kaiputahi supporting the oil companies. Well, I'll tell you now, Ngāti Kaiputahi hasn't made any comment whatsoever on whether they support it or not. Yaitanga Mahaki has entered into a dialogue with the oil company and developed a draft memorandum of understanding, which basically says that we agreed to continue dialogue so that we can understand what you're trying to do, but we haven't made any commitments at all at this time. So I want to make that clear. And at the same time, we sit with them and we are discussing these issues every step of the way and asking the hard questions. What are you going to do with it when we ask the question about where you're going to take this water? Then they told us they're going to whip it across to the other side. And we say, well, what about the dangers in there? You know? What about the distances? It's not 20 kilometres that the fracking is going to be. And the fracking is actually, you were saying there that they push the water through. They actually use explosives to crack the shale, and then they pump that stuff in to keep it open, so then they ooze the stuff out. There's a whole lot of issues in there in terms of safety. There's what about the cleanups? And they're saying, rest assured, you know, we'll make sure that those things won't happen. So we raised the issue of the what's that boat that out of Arena and other issues. The Gulf of Mexico issue, even though that's offshore, not onshore. And also the other one is that the Mangatu lands and they have not, Apache and Tag hasn't got a permit to look at the Mangatu lands. That belongs to the Ministry of Economic and Development. They've got the permits for there. Apache has only from Te Hau, Waitangi, and then it cuts right up across up into Te Puia, and then down here, but they're only looking at that one well at this point in time. And this is what I've been able to glean from sitting down and listening and talking to them, but not giving any commitment that we support it, because we don't know enough about what's going on. And I'm not satisfied with their management techniques and what they said they will do, because I've seen it too. What they will do and what they actually do are two different things. I think that whole thing in Australia, where the gas is leaking everywhere, the people spent something like 2 years trying to get them to clean it up, and they're still in the courts. And the courts will just suck them dry, and they've got no more money to fight it, because like Tag and Apache is worth $45 billion, and they're only a medium-sized company. I mean, you know, these are the things that we've got to be mindful of, that these guys are heavyweights, and the government is right behind them, and so we ourselves need to make sure that, you know, we get ourselves sorted out and organised if that's what we want to do. But the last thing I want is just to see riffraff coming in because there's a scrap, and deciding to you know, stir the pot and cause, and because then they fly up, then they go home back to their places and leave us to clean up the mess. There's a saying in Māori, ka rere mai te manu ka chiko ka rere ate. The bird flies in, it craps, and then it flies off again, and we're left to clean it up. And so, and it's no criticism, it's just that we, as a people who are going to live here for the next 7 generations, we've got to be mindful. And one of the things in our tribe is we're saying that the decisions we make today is going to affect the 7th generation. And the last thing we want is for them to come and see us in the other world and thanks for nothing, because that's all you left us. And so it's important for us, that's why we're taking the stand that we are at this point in time. Steady as you go, get the facts, but don't jump into it and then find yourself having to apologise to someone later on. And everything you said there, yeah, it's good, it's right, but up here we don't have the big water basins that they like to have in Australia, but we have unstable land. And if we're going to start putting charges down in among all that bentonite, and once you can start to move it, we know what happens when bentonite and this landform starts to move. Just go up to the Tarndale slip and you'll see what you can.
I wouldn't take the emphasis of water though, because it is the same principle. This is all gas, whatever. The same problem is right here, is going through the water to get to whatever you want.
Yeah.
That is the problem, and we know that they leak. They do leak. There's proof. There's all sorts of stuff. And again, I'll go back to that thing. They're already starting up here. They've got the foot in the door, which is a good start for them. They talk about piecemeal applications, whatever, politics, but it has started. And so they're a bit closer to doing what they want to do. And so you really have to, if something's going to happen, or if we're going to talk about it, we have to do it right now. Because
yeah, the thing is, before they can go beyond where they are now, of getting that 10-metre hole put into the ground onto the pad, they've got to put in for the resource concept. We have a new management plan that has been now registered with the Gisborne District Council, and they must now discuss with us before they can, and we have to have input into that resource concept. And that's where, and it's not just a little concept piece of paper that's big, it's 2 big huge volumes.
Yep.
And they'll try and kill us with information. But at the end of the day, we've got to make sure that whatever we have to say is going to be, going to be reasonable.
Whether it's binding or not is the big question, I suppose, because we've seen things, a lot of great, we've seen a lot of good stuff happen, but if it's not binding, it doesn't mean anything. Legally
it will be binding with us,
but we hope it is.
We will be having more than lock the gate, it won't have a gate. And that's we don't mind going down the, using, you know, following the system and that, but at the end of the day, these are the questions we're asking them, and they're unable to actually answer us yet on how they propose to actually achieve those challenges that we've been giving them. Because, like you said, they say it's not going to happen. We know it will happen. I've been around long enough. I've been in the system long enough to see them give the promises, and you just go up into the Mangatu forest and see the monitoring that they've been doing on the slash and crap up there. And they can actually drive right up to those skid sites, and yet they can't see the mess that's there. And the council is doing and giving them the tick off. You know, we know that, and that's why we're saying we're not going to be satisfied with the council's agreement to say we'll send someone out. You said what? They got two monitoring people to cover an entire thing nearly the size of New Zealand. Yeah, that's just ridiculous. And so these are the challenges, but you know, we've got to make sure that we've done everything we possibly can first before we start taking some real action. Because sometimes we may have to take those real actions because the Crown, the Council, and our good Mayor can see a boom season for a few of them. But it's not going to be, yeah, you're right, it's not going to be for us. There's no work for us.
Sure,
Can I just make a comment? I'm Angela here, kia ora everyone. Kia ora. I'm from Karataki originally, now living in Hawke's Bay. And I've been working a lot with Hannah Wilcox from Karangaho, and the Don't Frack the Bay group in Hawke's Bay, so I drew up here today. And one of the things that strikes me about what has happened in Hawke's Bay is that Hannah and her iwi worked really hard to get consensus among themselves, and it was really hard work. But they also then reached out to the Pākehā landowner who was considering putting a well onto his place, and then they shared their resource with him because he didn't have the support of an iwi. And I say the same here. You know, I know Dan Hood from my childhood. He's a gentle giant, and you will know him too. He's a lovely man, but he doesn't have a huge resource around him. And he needs people to reach out to him and say, hey Dan, have you thought about this? We went and heard Drew the other day. Have you heard this information? And gather around him and help him. Because I don't know how far he is on his track. But if everybody turns their back on him, then you lose that opportunity to maybe pull him into thinking about the consequences of what could happen here. So I just share that information because the Parangaho iwi working with that landowner was what made the difference.
Just to add to what Matua said with regards to the district council, the local bodies and the national bodies probably all rubbing their hands together for the economic drive that mining can bring. What methods do you know that these gas companies, mining companies, use to piggyback their way in through local government and national government?
They usually, instead of getting a social licence from the community by showing that they can do what they do well and to the benefit of the community, they try to buy different groups in the community. So they'll give money to the local football club, the show society, maybe the community centre, that sort of thing. And it silences those people too. You know, they think, well, hell, we really badly, you know, every community organisation needs money, so they get money from here and then, you know, they shut up.
Yeah, well, they took a senior manager from the council to Canada to show them the good work they do over there, and he's come back with glowing reports.
Yeah, see, I mean, that's it. You wine and dine somebody and then you only show them what you want to show them.
Well, exactly.
Yeah.
I had raised the issue about, what about who's talking to the brown people over there?
Yeah, exactly.
And he'll have the opportunity to talk to them as well. And I said, well, they ain't going to tell him anything, because we know ourselves. And they said, well, why aren't you sending a brown fellow over there to talk to the brown people? And and the guys come back with his little report, and the council is very, very positive and enthusiastic with it.
Yeah, we saw that today on You got asked in 2
Yes.
o'clock meeting to stand and give us a reason why it was so glowing over there.
Not a
It
peep.
didn't happen. It didn't happen, so
Didn't
you got a
even
few in the chambers.
I mean, these guys they're smart. I mean, you know, when they first came to us, and the step-by-step process, you know, inch by inch, it's a
That's what
situation.
they do,
They came in and they introduced themselves and they went away. And they came again and wanted to understand our values and our culture, and they went away again. Then they came, then we got them to come, and they had to face our people, and they came to our marae. And then they brought all their top guns and put up these beautiful pictures and everything else, and colour and everything. Then they went away again, and then we came back and started talking about how we can now progress this whole
yeah. It's
process.
very good. The typical technique they use with the cockies, cow cockies, so grazies, in Queensland was they'd send in a couple, young couple usually, nice looking, you know, friendly. They'd bring cookies, and preferably somebody who came from the local area. And they go in there and they'd say, oh look, you know, you'll hardly know we're here, you know, well it'll see you through the drought, and you know, all that sort of stuff. And then if they didn't want to have anything to do with it, the next ones that come would be beefier, you know, big guy. And he'd say, we've got 14 lawyers. How many lawyers have you got? You know, we've got 2 QCs. How many QCs have you got? We'll take it to the land court, you know.
Well, they've done that to us. They said to us that, you know, they don't want to, but if they are forced to.
Forced to, we'll have to take it to the land court. Yeah.
Well, I'm sure we don't want to. Let's go to court. Let's
Come
go
on.
to
They
court.
sure don't want it. That's right.
Let's test it.
Yeah. Over here.
Yeah, Drew, why don't what's stopping the oil companies coming to buy the land and nullify the whole Lockwood Gate issue?
Well, the coal miners do that, and that certainly does. It makes it much more difficult to use lock the gate techniques against coal mining, because they can, you know, they're pretty good. They can always find somebody in there, an old couple, for example, who badly want to sell. Or, yeah, they can find somebody that they can appeal to. But with coal seam gas, they can't buy all the properties. They just simply can't do it. It's not economic for them to do it. It's much more economic for them to get an access agreement to get onto that property. It costs them a fraction of the amount. So that's why they do it.
I thought land was really cheap over in Aussie.
I can't
They're
find it. So, yeah. Well, no, I mean,
So relative to what they can get
they're going to have to, you know, they would have to pay, you know, a decent sized block. They might have to pay a couple of $1 million for it. They can get access to the same property for a few $1,000s if they just have an access agreement. So yeah,
It's economics.
Yeah, it's economic.
Drew, you mentioned some criteria that if the companies met the criteria, you were happy for them to go ahead and do their work.
Yeah.
How many of the companies have ever met those criteria?
No, they haven't. And
Or how many have ever tried to
they
meet
haven't
the
even
criteria?
tried to.
Tried.
Yeah. That's where I was hoping to go with all of this, that either the pressure goes on governments and they implement legislation that does it, or the pressure on the company that desperately wants to stay in business and is prepared to compromise to you know, keep those protections in there. Look, there's an enormous arrogance in these companies. These are some of the biggest companies in the world, and they can't believe that these ordinary folk in the community are stopping them. They just can't believe it, you know, especially when governments give them approval. So, at Cecil Plains, for example, did I mention Cecil Plains? Okay. Cecil Plains is that beautiful black soil country I referred to before. I've got friends who got a lovely farm. The community, you know, they shouldn't be touching that area. I mean, this is black soil that goes down 10 metres. You can't find soil like that outside of the Ganges Delta. So, you know, they should be saying, well, we won't go on the Connemara floodplain. We'll stay off it. You know, we're going to mess things up if we do. They simply won't do it. You know, that would be the compromise. There's plenty of other land they've got in tenements Yeah, they've got large tenements right across southern Queensland, but they insist on their right to go into Central Plains, which is the really good farmland. They won't make that compromise, then it's just simply a standoff.
Drew, I would be more inclined to say that what we're probably be looking at is prevention is by far better than cure.
Absolutely.
And for a lot of these areas where there is a lot of uncertainty, well, where there has been also a lot of controversy in terms of some of these practices, is it safe just not to engage with any type of agreements and arrangements until we're actually quite clear that those practices are safe for us?
That's a really good question. And some of our groups have had different answers to that. Some have engaged. The Central Plains people actually engaged for 2.5 years. And one of the problems with that, by the way, was that their leadership lost contact with their own community when they did that. And when it all failed, when it all broke down, then they had to re-educate the community about what was going on. And you know, it's been difficult. But my advice would be, on the basis of our experience, do not sign any agreements. No agreements of any sort. They say, look, all we want to do is come in and do a seismic survey. They come in and do a seismic survey and find the stuff there, they are going to come in. You know, it's better off that they don't know what's there. So engage with them in order to get information, by all means, but don't sign it.
Well, the other issue too is in terms of seismic exploration, there are other anemones in terms of environmental issues just in that as well.
Oh, yes,
and the way in which they do that.
Yeah.
So, you know, it's not just about the second stage of actually exploration of hydraulic fracturing, but it's also the seismic exploration that actually impacts on our land and our people. And the reality of it is we're focused on one area, and we should have actually been focused right at the beginning, before they even got to that stage. And in terms of the best management practices, because we face a lot of legislative criteria and statutes here, in terms of the areas we're addressing at local authority level, for some of us, including Ngāti Ki Kaipata, we actually do have an iwi management plan in place. We could possibly say we're privileged enough to have something in place as opposed to having nothing, but that doesn't necessarily mean we are totally safeguarded. So the reality comes back to when we're looking at it from a community basis, we're looking at it in our country here in Aotearoa as from an iwi perspective, but also as from a non-iwi perspective. And it's that liaising that has to keep everybody safe.
Yeah.
And from our perspective, the only thing that gives us a bit of leverage right now in terms of iwi is that we have an iwi management plan in place. It may not be for some people, well, how binding is that? But for us, it's a lot more binding in terms of meeting our treaty needs, meeting our Indigenous needs, and meeting other cultural significant needs to us historically. That might be something that you may not have in Australia, but we do have that here. However, in saying that, I am in total agreement, because I created that INP plan, that until we are quite clear what hazards are in place and what